Hello and welcome back to the Book, Business, and Brand Building Summit. I'm your host, Jesse Krieger. I'm joined today by a very, very special somebody, and I don't use those words lightly. This is my dear friend, my business partner, the author of Limitless Women, the author of Stop the Spinning, Laura Gisborne, joining us today. Laura, how are you doing?
Great. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Great.
And I know it's always funny. Here we are live, so to speak, recording, doing our interview. And of course, there's always, 15, 20 minutes behind the scenes stuff, getting ready for these interviews and sound checking. And we always cross our fingers and pray that the technology works. And Laura is such a powerful woman that sometimes she's been known to even short circuit cellular phones and all manner of undescribable things happen with technology when she is fully on. I really just want to take a minute and introduce Laura, give a little bit of context, I guess. We met in the end of 2014 at a live event called the Thrive Academy JV Partners Retreat in Santa Cruz. And my first impression when I saw her, we were doing like a mastermind exercise, was I was looking at her background, 9-time entrepreneur, has a winery, has properties all over. I was just like, what do I have to offer this woman? This woman's so out of my league. And she felt differently, thankfully. And we ended up getting into a discussion initially around publishing, but it quickly spiraled into becoming just amazing friends. She's invited me to speak at her events. She speaks at my events. We help each other's clients, and we're also friends offline too. We were going to record this interview at her beautiful home in Sedona, Arizona, and we got too caught up in just hanging out to actually sit down and hit record. So that's why Miss Gisborne is joining us from a hotel room instead of her palace in Cornville, which is just outside of Sedona. So Laura, that's the very, very short version of my introduction for you. And perhaps you can just share a little bit about your own background and sort of what you do, and then we can dive into the interview from there.
Good. So first, let me say thank you for having me here, because I know you have a lot of amazing authors and people have done some incredible things in business, not just locally, but globally. So I'm actually very honored to be with you. Thank you. And as far as what I do these days, is kind of a fascinating adventure. Like a lot of people that are called to be messengers, I feel like the work just keeps evolving. It keeps changing, it keeps growing. And I'm currently in a season of life where I'm moving as much as I can be really into doing philanthropy with my work. So, having a message to share is not always easy. There's a lot of steps, and you've certainly made that so much easier for me, Jesse. So thank you for all of the help that you've given me over the last, year and a half now. And
Oh, wonderful. And I just realized now that the whole time I was giving your introduction, the camera was just focused on you. So now it'll be a little bit more of a back and forth. And for anybody that did miss that, here's a beautiful shot of Laura's latest book, Limitless Women, which I had the honor of publishing and writing the foreword for. And so, Laura, I know that from here, sort of looking forward, that you're moving into a role as a full-time philanthropist, but you're also very involved in doing coaching and live events, and you have 2 books now. I mean, how would you sort of describe the nature of the work that you do, which is predominantly with women and business owners? Because, we have our relationship, and it's very dynamic. And I know when you meet women that you have this gift of sort of seeing them and seeing them on a deep level where they feel seen. And that usually precipitates quickly developing relationships with people, as I've seen you do it so many times. So how do you put that into your own words in terms of the work that you're doing with women in the world?
Well, I think, really who I'm here to serve are other leaders that are interested in incorporating philanthropy and really making a difference with their work. And I think a lot of people feel that, but they don't always know how to do it. It becomes a conversation of someday when I get successful, someday when I have enough money, someday when I make it, whatever it is. that I'm going to make a difference. And the reality is everyone's actually living their legacy every moment. We're just not usually conscious of it. So I would say that in the business context, just simply because of the fact that I've had so many companies, I've had 9 companies, I've sold 6 of them, I tend to be asked really like, how is that possible? And, you know, when my children were younger, the question was often around, how is it possible for you to have a home and a family and run companies and still be available to, you know, take care of yourself and make a difference and volunteer? So I think that there's always this question in people's minds of how is it possible that you actually do so much? And I, you know, for me, I don't feel like what I do is so different than what a lot of other people do, but I think it's really a matter of focus. And, you know, in the context of the book writing, I started being asked about my book. My first book, before it was coming, it wasn't something I was looking to do, but people kept saying, tell your story, write a book. And I was like clueless about how to do that or even what that was about. And I sat down to write my first book, which I thought was going to be about business and business training. And it was anything but that, as you know, because you've read it. And, you know, everybody has a story. There's something about each one of us that's brought us to this point that we're in right now. You know, somebody who's listening to these trainings and these interviews that you're offering, just kind of seeking kind of what their next step is. I think we're all on a journey together, and the way that we can support one another is by sharing our messages and by sharing our distinctions. And I love what's available in books. I mean, a book really can change your life, and you remind me of that often when I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to write again. And it does. It makes such a difference for people. You know, there's something about seeing somebody that's gone before us that helps us be inspired, so we know we can get out and do what it is that we're called to do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I know your first book is called Stop the Spinning. And, you know, when you were coming into that, you know, that process of writing, and you thought it was going to be about business, but how is that process for you in terms of what ultimately came out, which, you know, I think is a book that helps people get out of the mental loop, get out of that spinning mindset where you're doing a lot of activity. You feel exhausted at the end of the day, but you're not actually moving forward. You're not actually moving towards your goals. And, you know, I've seen you help people get unstuck very quickly in some cases. And, you know, with Stop the Spinning, I know is a fairly concise book, but it's to the point. It's punchy. Everything is in there that needs to be there. So maybe you can talk a little bit about, you know, the writing process for that, and then you can take it from there.
All right. So clearly I needed help because I had never written a book before. So I asked a woman who had written several best-selling books if she would help me. And she said, I don't do that. And I said, well, that's okay. Here's a check. Just tell me how much you want because I need you to help me. So she did. And, you know, that's a typical thing for me. If somebody says it can't be done, then I'm usually just figuring out how to do it. So she helped me get it outlined and really look at what was the heart of my message. And a lot of what you do now, Jess, what you know, in Bestseller Summit, how you really help people get the structure and the context. I didn't know anybody who was doing that. I didn't know how to do that. So it was helpful to just hire someone to help me get the, you know, basically the context. And yeah, and then it's just the process of writing, right? Of just sitting down and getting it out. Which was not so easy. And then all the stuff that actually comes up, like when you, I don't know if this happens for you when you're writing, but a lot of times I sit down and I think I'm going to write one thing and then something else completely different comes through. And, you know, so there's something in the joy of being written through, if you will. Like sometimes stuff is just coming through and it's not even what I think I'm going to write about. So
yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And I'll admit even, you know, recently I've been more hit or miss with my own writing, but I love the situation I have now of being more reactive to other people's writing, other people's ideas, playing in that realm of helping shape ideas, give them the contour that ultimately results in a book form, and perhaps even at the expense of writing myself. But I'm sure I'll have another book or so coming in the not too distant future. And this is about you, Laura. This is your moment to shine. So I guess maybe we can bridge that process. If you're, you know, working on your first book and you felt sort of stuck and you were looking around and asking people and even just handing out a check to somebody to help you do it or even do it with you or do it for you, how does that experience compare to your more recent book, Limitless Women, which of course we collaborated on?
Yes.
In terms of the process and the ease with which both the message came through and getting it out into the world, into people's hands?
Well, I think it's so, I'm just thinking about who's listening and who's watching, right? In the audience, and in the context of anytime you do something for the first time, it can be really scary, right? It's like scary. It's, you're nervous. You're not really sure you're doing it right. And then after you've done it, then it's going to be okay, right? So I think writing the second one was so much easier. Plus I had you, which made it night and day as far as publishing and really helping me get what it was that we were doing. And I knew that there was, I knew that there was something so powerful that came out of the first book that I didn't expect. And that was the feedback that I got from people who had read it, right? Because I was kind of like, oh, so vulnerable and it's going to be good and blah, blah, blah. And I was visited by people again and again saying, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your message. Thank you for the help. Thank you for the ideas. Thank you for the tools. So then that for me gave me inspiration to get the second one going, right? Because you thought like if the first one could help people, then wow, let me get it in action and get the second one done and get the tools and get it going. So it was much easier the second time.
Well, I want to sort of stick with that, what you were talking about in terms of people giving you feedback and the way that you perhaps didn't even expect it, because a lot of people, I think a lot of people watching our interview now, a lot of people here on the Book Business Brand Building Summit, are thinking about writing a book or in the process of writing a book, and maybe they feel overwhelmed, or they're looking at, even after I write my book, there's so much to be done to get it out, to make it look good and get it into people's hands. And within that thought process, which is, I think, healthy so far as you continue moving forward, what can get lost is what happens on the other side. Once it's done, once it's out, once people are finding it, discovering it, reading it, well beyond your, your group of family and friends, it begins to actually touch people's lives. And what comes back as a result of that has both, surprised me, certainly through my own book, and I think this is the case with many other authors. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about what reaction people had and how people looked at and spoke with you and found you and wanted to work with you as a result of having that book done and out to the world.
Yeah, there's definitely a positioning that happens that's very, very different for you as an author. So different than if you're out there just trying to hang your shingle and figure out, who it is that you're here to serve. And there's something about getting clarity, which is my favorite thing in the world. There's something about getting clarity by writing the book, by getting your message really outlined and structured and seeing, what all this caring that you have in your heart, all these messages that you have, getting them in a context that somebody else can digest. There's something in that fact that your message is your message is your message. So once you have this, then when I was invited to go on television, they could look at the book and say, okay, let me read this chapter. They can kind of see an idea of what your message is, right? Or you're speaking to an audience as a speaker. It's very clear. These are the topics that you're really up on, and somebody can look at that in a book very quickly and digest what your message is. So I think it's such a high accelerator for people. Publishing a book is a high accelerator to your business. Because you get clarity, and then it also positions you for the rest of the world of who you are. Why do we go to you? What is it that you know? So yeah, it's a must-have. How's that?
I think that's appropriate. And I think, any difficulty that people experience in writing the book, if you just put it in context of, you're not just putting words on paper, it's digging deep within yourself and being willing to reveal stories that may be vulnerable or uncomfortable to share, as well as inspiring stories and, of course, useful strategies that people will take away from reading the book. But once you do that work, then it really does work for you. Your book works for you after you put in the work for your book. And that's something I hear repeated time and time again throughout this summit and just talking to authors. So hopefully a word of encouragement from Laura and myself that if you're in the middle of the writing process and losing perspective, stick with it, because the feedback that you get, the testimonials, the reviews, the people saying that you really changed the course of my life with your book, having not even met them, it's such a beautiful thing and it's so worth it. Anything else you want to add on that?
Well, I'm just looking at all the books behind you, and I'm seeing, how much wisdom is there and how much love is there, right? You just think of what you've published so far, and here's the truth. if you get called to share your message, you can't not do it. You can try. I always say you can run, but you can't hide. Like, it's going to find you. And I think about all the authors that you've already published that I've had the honor of becoming friends with, and what amazing people they are, you know. And so I think that somebody who's called to the summit is feeling that calling and saying, maybe, how do I do it? Am I ready? You know, there's these questions that kick in for all of us. And it's great to know that you're not alone. I think, you know, of all the people that have gone before me that have probably had those same feelings, you know, and I know we've shared so much just in our own experiences of growing together and watching all the people behind you. You can't see them because, well, maybe you can. You can see them.
I can see them.
I love them all, right? I would just like, the people that are behind the message is really the juice of it all, right? The juice of the community that's so yummy. I can't wait to see everybody, you know, at the event. So.
Well, certainly that's my great joy as a publisher, and looking at these books is, you know, I can always reflect on the fact that with each one of them, it was a months-long process to get them to the shape that they're in and to ultimately share them. And I think we're at, you know, 18 out of 20 books now have hit #1 on Amazon in at least one category. And those other two, we've got plans in place to get them up there as well. But I think, you know, as a publisher, I'm also the best advocate for our authors. And, you know, that's a role that I take on gladly. And it's really the reason that I do this. But I want to go back to something you mentioned, Laura, about answering the calling, because, you know, I believe that if you feel called to write a book, then you're meant to do it. You don't need anybody else's permission. You don't need market research, et cetera, et cetera. If you feel the call from within, you're meant to do it. And, you know, I know for you, Laura, as after selling 5-6 companies, you had a beautiful place with a family outside of Sedona. And I remember you telling me the first time I visited you there that it was as big as you could dream at the time. And then you started to get invitations to speak and to media. And I know that you were initially a little bit resistant to it, but for people that already know you now, you run the Path to Freedom, you run Limitless Women, you do so much with philanthropy that inspired you to answer the call. Or what was that process like for you, sort of re-emerge into the world after you had, by any objective measure, made it and are successful?
It was no fun. You want me to tell you? It kind of sucked at times, and it's still a little hard at times. So it's, you know, I feel like there's a place where we figure it out the best we can, Jess. All of us, we're doing the best we can with what we have, and God always has a bigger plan. I mean, that is so true in my own life. Every time I think I've got it figured out, every time I think I've hit that pinnacle of this was my goal. And I've been really, really blessed, and I'm so grateful that I've hit the goals I've hit so far. But in some ways, I'm just like a babe in the woods. I'm just getting started. And so, you know, even in the training call I was doing this morning around revenue acceleration, I was just like, guys, I'm not Oprah. I'm not running a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm in the trenches right along with you, right? So it's something where I believe you want to find the people who are doing what it is you want to do, that have been successful, that are great at it, and that are passionate about you. Like, I knew when I talked to you the very first time, although I knew there was other things we were going to talk about, I knew you were so excited about publishing. I was just like, done. I'm done like dinner. You can publish my book. Great. You know, I want to always partner with people that are just so turned on and excited about what they do. And, you know, I think this goes back to what you asked me a few minutes ago, and I wasn't really clear about how to answer it, but I know that I get so excited to help people with their businesses if I know they're here for a bigger purpose, right? Like if I can see you and I can see that your heart is on fire for service, I want to just knock it out of the park with you financially quickly so that we can get money handled and have your, you know, your service, your bigger purpose, your healing that you're bringing to the world to get out to reach masses of people. So I think it's finding that resonance. And I know there are people, and I know this is supposed to be about me, but I know there are people that are seeing you right now that are just like, this is my guy. You know, that's how I felt when I met you. I was like, this is my guy. This is the guy who's going to take care of me and make sure that it happens. And I want to speak to this. This is important. The difference in going through the process of publishing Stop the Spinning by myself and like nights and weekends and sitting in the castle trying to formulate what the heck I was doing and reaching out for service that didn't really exist. I was trying to make it happen. Such a pain compared to connecting with you and just feeling fully supported and saying, Jesse, help me, and learning to ask for you to help me. It's a whole nother conversation. But having you like fully support me. I mean, I've told so many people this, just the whole publishing, like the bestseller day and the whole campaign and how it was handled, even just how beautifully you created the cover for me and the interior. You know, you covered for me, created for everybody, but I felt like you did it for me, which is this love of, you know, all the details. The details in the book are just, it's beautiful. You did such a beautiful job, sweetie.
Well, I think it was you who said to me that love is in the details. Is that all right?
I think I heard it on Oprah, but I've been borrowing it ever since.
But it's true. When it comes to a book, you know, there's something wonderful about turning each page and being pleasantly surprised, or picking it up and turning it over, looking at the front, the back, seeing just how everything's laid out and reads, that gets me excited. And I mean, I appreciate what you say, that perhaps there are people watching me throughout the course of this that are just like, you're the person I want to work with. Well, if that is the case, then I want to speak with you. And let's talk a little bit about Limitless Women, the book, but also the work that you're doing with women and philanthropy, and how truly, actually, let me speak to something a little bit before we even cover that. Because you mentioned when you see somebody or when you connect with somebody, you can see the work that they will be doing in the world or where they're going and that they're driven, how you just want to help them knock it out of the ballpark financially. You know, when we really got to know each other at a deeper level, beginning of last year, 2015, you helped me, and you helped me see how I could reorient my business around getting in conversations and connecting with people on the ideas that they had for their book and how to better explain the type of value, the type of service that I can offer them. And that actually accelerated my business tremendously in terms of the level of depth with which I worked with those authors and total revenue overall, which was a shift for me from spending so much time and energy on like online marketing stuff. And even when we met, I was sort of riding the crest of a wave of a big influx of online marketing, which you'll hear or perhaps know through, you know, Marisa Murgatroyd, who's one of our keynote presenters for this summit, hosted me on her summit, and it was wildly successful. But in light of all of that, the amount of money that I made and the amount of, to the degree to which my business developed and flourished, I think is largely attributable to, you know, you encouraging me to just be more in conversation with people and slow down and understand their goals and motivations and see where there's an overlap and where there's a fit. So, a little testimonial there for you. But I know that that's a lot of what you do for other people. So I want to reflect that back a little and see if that brings up something with regards to Limitless Women and how, you know, you're moving into philanthropy and service full time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting dance because it's two things, and it's actually completely integrated in my life, right? And I couldn't find anybody doing it, so then I had to just kind of craft it. And I think that there's something in the work of what we do with legacy leaders to have people incorporate philanthropy, but also to really look at their business as a tool, their business as a vehicle that can really create impact and change in the world. In the same way, I think it's just one more place that I love you is sharing that core value around your message really matters. Your book is not a business card. Your book is something that can really change somebody's life. And, you know, in the same way that is a piece of somebody's business in some ways, for a lot of authors, that clarity and message is really what takes them out in the world and gets them to really be successful in business and make a difference. So I think there's that place of us overlapping. So the live events, there's 2 live events. Limitless Women is one. It's coming up in April of 2017, hopefully every year, but that's when the next one is, April 7th through the 9th. And then the Path to Freedom event is for people that are they're well established in business and they know that they want to scale their companies. They want to look at exit strategies. And so those are the 2 live events that I host, and each of them are fundraisers for charity. And then the in between is as you know, I'm heading off to Africa here in a couple of weeks. Where I'm going to be in 2 different countries doing some filming on the ground with nonprofits that we support there. I'll be home for a little bit, and then I'm heading down to South America to work with Lynn Twist with women in the rainforest. And so a lot of the stuff that we take for granted, this actually is an important point, because a lot of the things that we take for granted as like, will my book really matter? Is my message really, pertinent? There's over 7 billion people in the world. And so when I'm going down to South America to work with women who are dying in childbirth and experiencing infant mortality, that's something that actually was the #1 cause of killers in the developed world not so long ago. And so I think a lot of times when we look at our message and say, oh, is it going to matter today? It totally matters. There's a whole planet of people that need to be served. So it's important to get it done. It
is. So, just speaking about Limitless Women, which I know you have an event called Limitless Women, and your book, you've interviewed some of the some pretty powerful women that are doing big things in philanthropy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how those relationships developed and how it ties in with that you're doing. And then I want to really spend the majority of the rest of the interview on philanthropy and service, because at a certain point, and I think you're at it, you can only make so much money before the next dollar is less exciting than the one before it. And your mentality sort of shifts to how can I really give back and provide service based on causes and for things that you believe in passionately. Maybe you could speak a little bit about how you came in contact with an ultimate in Limitless Women and how that plays into the work that you're doing with philanthropy.
Yeah, and I think it's an evolution. And I think that, the women that I was able to interview for Limitless Women are women that I looked up to, right? Women that I just were my role models, that I just completely admired. And I think there was something very powerful in that. But there's also something in bringing a voice, bringing a message that put me on a different level with them. So I was learning, and at the same time, building relationships with them. And so as I'm crafting my own version of philanthropy, my own version of service in the world, I've got to be around other people that are doing similar work or doing work that is same but different. And I think that there's something in that. So the book was a great vehicle for helping me get clarity about my next steps. And it's interesting how when you put things in action, how the things that you can't see start to unfold, right? There's something about being in action with the book and getting it published and tying that into the live event and having all of these things kind of present now with the television show and stuff that I don't even know all the details about now, but as I need to know, they start presenting. So the part about getting in action is everything. Everything.
It is. And I mean, the analogy I always use is like if you're driving from, say, Los Angeles to San Francisco at night on the freeway, you can only see like 500, 1,000 feet ahead of you at the headlights. But as long as you keep moving, then you see the signs, you see the off-ramps, you see any obstacles, and you ultimately will get to your destination. But if you just stop and you're sitting there and all you can see is 1,000 feet ahead of you, if you sit long enough, you start to think that that's all there is. And yeah, I think it's a useful analogy because once you're taking action, that is, you build inertia and momentum, and other people see you and they want to join and help out where they can. So, if even if you're not 100% your mission is in the world or what your calling is, as long as you're starting and moving and taking action, a lot of that will start to come into focus. That's been my experience. Anything else you want to share on that?
Well, yes, of course. I think there's a place where, in my experience, I grew up with the world. Let me just say, I grew up feeling that the world was a very scary place. I grew up feeling very isolated, feeling very alone. And it's not the truth, but it's what I felt. And, a lot of people could look at my life and look at the experiences I had as a young girl and as a young woman that, involved a lot of pain. And at the same time, there was never a time, Jesse, where I had to worry about, can I get a drink of water? When we were doing the research for Limitless Women, the most recent statistics we could find were that 2.8 billion people, which is almost 3 billion people, were still living on less than $3 a day. And that was from the United Nations. And I think it's a kind of a fascinating thing that sometimes we get so caught up in our stuff, right? Our stuff is our stuff, and I'm not here to poo-poo that. But we also sometimes use our stuff as a way to hold ourselves back for our service. And I think when we get to be of service, we actually have a message, we're having a calling, it's not coming by accident. And if there's just one person you can help behind you, or several people you can help behind you, you want to do that if you can, right? I think there's something in being able to get to help others that is quite an honor, actually.
It is. It is indeed. And it makes that aspect of business so rewarding to be able to help others, or in a philanthropic context, just to experience the result. To point out at this time that Limitless Women, actually all of the proceeds from this book are going towards charitable causes. Do you want to give a shout out to the actual charities that are benefiting from sales of Limitless Women?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So 2 charities are receiving the benefits of this, and both because I think they make an incredible impact in the world. One is the Unstoppable Foundation, which was started by a friend of mine, Cynthia Kersey, who in just a short period of time, in less than a decade, she's currently feeding, clothing, educating, and providing clean water and healthcare to close to 9,000 children every day. And that's really the piece where I would go back to the context of nobody does it alone. It was through some very smart partnerships, and you can read about this in the book, and who she aligned with and how she really realized that if she was just one person out there plugging along, there was going to be a place where she was going to, hit the ceiling, versus partnering with others and building community around her. She was so masterful at that. So that's one person's organization that we're supporting, that I'll be with in Africa in a few weeks. And then the other one is Sandra Yancey's Foundation for eWomen Network. And Sandra, it was so great. Like, I've known her for several years, but in interviewing her for the book, I saw different things, right? I learned new things about her own childhood, and how this called her to always be so generous. And the mottos and the culture of eWomen Network are to lift as you climb and give first, share always. And I've spoken at chapters all over North America, and I can tell you that value system, that culture is pervasive. And when you're in a community of others who are giving and lifting, it's amazing what can happen. And I think at this point she has, through eWomen Network over the last 14, 15 years, I think they've sponsored 137 different charities. I mean, some great number. But they use their vehicle to support other vehicles that uplift women and children globally. So it's great to be a part of something that's making a big difference for others. And you don't have to know all the answers yourself.
That's for sure. And, for me, it's been kind of fun to just play follow the leader with you on some of your philanthropic adventures. You invited me. I've been twice now to the Unstoppable Foundation Charity Gala. And the thing I noted, and I make monthly contributions towards funding children's education in Africa as a result of you, and also now funding the Pachamama Foundation on a monthly basis, which preserves rainforests in Ecuador and does some incredible work with indigenous people in the Amazon basin. And, I think what's fascinating is, one, if for anybody that's traveled to these places, how much of a disparity there can be on our one little planet here floating in the solar system. I mean, there are people literally, as Laura mentioned, living on $1 or $2 a day, or in refugee camps. And it's such a contrast to, a comfortable, even semi-comfortable life in a developed country with infrastructure and so forth. And so what I think is fascinating that you're intimately involved in and can speak to is the way in which some of these charities bridge that divide. Something like the Unstoppable Gala, an annual charity dinner, has become sort of like the who's who for people in our industry, meaning, authors, coaches, transformational leaders, speakers, etc., all come together, and it's a black tie event, and there's a nice meal and everything. And it raises a ton of money that actually gets put to really good use. And I think they're getting better and better at showing the impact that's made through these fundraising initiatives and through these activities. So do you want to speak a little bit about, bridging that gap through philanthropy in terms of the vast difference of experience of people in the world?
Yeah, well, I think what's important, Jess, is that, you don't have to get there. Like, you don't have to be in the black tie world. That's not really what's important here. What's important is that everybody matters. The whole idea of what we're doing with Give Big, Live Big is to say, what can you do, right? Like, if you're a person who has time that you could volunteer, I served on the board for Habitat for Humanity for many years, and organizations would get together and people from the grocery store that worked at the grocery store, these were not people that were making great income. So we get together as a community and share an opportunity to contribute, to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so I think that the place to look at is always like, it's not that if this isn't your calling, it's not that that's wrong, but what can we bring? How can we make a difference? And just bringing that to consciousness starts to present opportunities, I think, for people.
Yeah, I'll speak to that for a second. On my book, Lifestyle Entrepreneur, which I didn't publish, it's published by Morgan James, but you can see here that Morgan James Publishing is partnered with Habitat for Humanity. And what they do, which I think is beautiful, is one, a percentage of all book sales goes to Habitat for Humanity. More importantly, the company helps actually build houses for people in, I think, the Virginia and North Carolina area is the chapter they're involved in. And once they've built a home, they give them a catalog of all their books and say, pick as many as you want. And when you guys move in, there'll be a bookshelf with as many Morgan James Publishing titles, so that you not only have a home, but you can actually start a life and, be connected through the written word to other people that can inspire you. So all sorts of ways.
Are you there? I lost you for a second.
Yeah. So, I think bringing this to this sort of current time, Limitless Women, you just had your event recently in Los Angeles, and I was fortunate to come and to get to speak to your women there. And I know that you have begun filming for a show is it called Give Big, Live Big?
That's what the title is today.
Big, with Laura Gisborne. And, it's sort of an extension in a way, as I see it, of the interviews and the way that you really help expand the reach of these philanthropic leaders. And you had the chance to interview Lynn Twist, the founder of not only the Hunger Project, but also the Pachamama Foundation, and the author of The Soul of Money. What was that experience like for you? And where do you see yourself going with Give Big, Live Big, the TV show, and how that plays into your philanthropy works?
Here's the piece. I think that the most extraordinary things that happen are done by ordinary people. And I think that what's important is with Give Big, Live Big, thank you for asking, is really how do we tell the story of you don't wait until you get there to start giving, how giving actually causes the growing, how each of us doing a little bit. I think one of the things in Lynn's interview, she was talking about coordinating 100,000 volunteers for the Hunger Project and literally changing the amount of people who are dying on a daily basis of hunger. I mean, that is not done by one person. That's done by a beautiful leader who organized a passion and really got into it and did what she could do and surrounded herself with the people that she needed to. And I think that that's the biggest message that I see, is that if each of us can actually see where we can make a difference in a small way, that combined to community, we've never had a time in the world, and I'm preaching to the choir because you're the guy who knows about internet marketing, but we've never had a time in the world where we could reach more people for free, right? And for low cost, and to be able to actually see that collaboration is the key to success. The idea that it's all on you or you have to do it yourself is never going to get you there. It's only when you realize that through collaboration and partnership that everything is possible, that the world starts to change.
Yeah, I think, I'll speak to that for a moment, since you're aware of my business and live events too. Is I really had to weigh this decision of, do I run an event I was planning on running in May, which is going to be an in-person event, and I was going to be the primary speaker and presenter, and it felt like, and it would have been truly a ton of work, and that would have been sort of going it, trying to do it all myself, right? And the alternative I saw, which we had already begun the work on the Book Business and Brand Building Summit, was just to really prioritize this and use it as a lever to really get in touch with and go in depth with dozens of people that I admire and who I think are doing great work in the world. And ultimately I made the decision to just cancel that May event and double down all my efforts to make this the best event possible. And embedded in that decision is one of, sure, I'm the host and I'm here on these interviews and I'm, have done a great amount of work to put this together, but this is way more than just me. We've got a team of 5 people working on this summit, great team of people that I want to acknowledge. And also, 25 authors and entrepreneurs that are coming together and dozens of promotional partners. So shifting from, hey, am I going to run my own live event and do all this work and do it all myself, felt so overwhelming compared to putting in the work. And sure, there's a lot of work that goes into a summit like this, but bringing together people and having the resulting reach and impact be exponential. So I think there's something valuable there. I hope everybody watching this can take away is that you don't get bonus points for doing it all yourself. You don't get a gold star if you put in 18 hours a day and resist delegating or bringing on a team or even asking for support. And when you do, it's usually there waiting for you, isn't it?
It can be.
It can be. There have been some times when you've asked for support and it's just cascades opened and the floodgates got kicked in and people showed up in such a big way for you. And I know that that's a lot of the work that you're doing with and for other people. So maybe you can just give you throughout even just the rest of this year, what is it like to be Laura Gisborne, Wonder Woman philanthropist of the world?
Well, I think it's pretty humbling, right? I mean, it's humbling right now to be in a position where the things that I worked for got me to where I am now, where I can actually choose. And I think that there's something that's important is that everybody gets to choose. I mean, not say everybody. If you're in a developed nation, you're on a computer, you're on a telephone, you're in a position where you have more choices, you have more freedom than most humans, right? So I think being in a position to choose where you spend your time and how you choose your time is really a great luxury. And it's also a responsibility for all the people that don't have access to things that we take for granted, like fresh water, healthcare, food, shelter. These are big deals. And I think that when we are in a position where we can use our resources and we have access to education like what you're providing here, Jess. I mean, the piece of what's available in the summit is one thing to hear interesting stories about people who have gone before. It's a whole other thing to look for distinctions and how we can be good stewards of those tools. How we can take those tools and actually get out in the world and use them in our own businesses to make a difference. Get things handled. I think we owe it to ourselves to get things handled so that we can help people who don't have access. I think that that's really the key. And so more and more as I'm listening carefully for where God is offering me support and not being in my own ego about I have to do it. Adam Markell, who's another friend of mine, says it's a 2 times thing. Like if somebody's trying to double their income or try to make it in the world, how do I double what I'm doing? It's a 2x mindset to say, how do I get it done? It's a 10x mindset to say, who can help me get this done? And, we all have a purpose. We all have something that's special and unique about us. I call it our superpowers, right? Other people might call it that as well. But I think if we look at our life experience, if we can bring what we have to the table in a fully elaborated way, thank you, Clark Gaither, and really playful out in community, surrounded by others who are also sharing values that we have, really everything's possible. And that's a life well lived. I mean, really, it's a pretty luxurious life.
It is indeed. Yeah. And so, I mean, and I'd love for you to share sort of where you going. You're going to Africa. Yep. You've been in Ecuador this year. You're going to New Zealand. You're going to Vanuatu. You're not just here in the U.S. living comfortably, raising money for charity. You are very much on the ground, quite literally all over the world. I mean, what is that like for you? And what is it that compels you to travel to far-flung destinations to continue doing this work?
I I think on a personal level, I'm going because I can, because I get to, right? And on a professional level, I know that there's nothing that translates energetically like person to person. There's a lot of stuff you can do online. And I think to bring the message for me at this point requires, and it gives me the opportunity to be with people personally. So you talked about this earlier, about me encouraging you to slow down and be present with the people around you in a business context. We're sometimes so busy making a living that we lose sight of this is it, right? And, there's a level of compassion we have to have for ourselves as we're going on the process. And there's a level of compassion and connection that moves things very quickly when we can be present with other people. So it's great being me, to answer the question. And more importantly, I get to be with the people because there's something about bringing the message from where they are that's much more authentic than me pontificating or saying this is how it is for them. I can't say how it is for them, but they can say how it is for them. And if I can bring that message back to those of us that really want to make a difference and don't know how, then that's, to me, really a good way to use the time.
I really like how you said that. You can't say how it is for them, but they can, and you can be a messenger and a conduit for sharing that with people in a way that they may not be able to reach. And historically, probably have not been. And I really like and want to acknowledge how you invite your whole community, your whole tribe, your clients along with you on these philanthropic adventures. And some of them are, maybe you can speak a little bit about the New Zealand and Vanuatu trip that you have coming up and how it's a combination of like charity, leadership development, and just a really fun lifestyle entrepreneur-esque type of a travel.
Yeah. So for this particular trip, I was invited by a friend of mine who's an amazing philanthropist, Bright Laureano, and she's done incredible work on the ground, again, in Africa and South America. She currently lives in Ecuador. And the idea with the program is to look at how do you develop yourself, how do you develop your business, and also in the context of being there, how do you connect with wisdom that's much older than we are, right? There's something that's happening with indigenous people, not just in South America, not just in Asia, not just in Europe, not just in the United States, but indigenous people have a beautiful wisdom. And so there's an opportunity in the trip to be connected to elders that we may not have, again, the opportunity to connect with. They're not going to be on the internet with us, right? There's something about that. There's something about being able to pay forward your message in a series of TED Talks at a university, which is very exciting and humbling to be a part of, right? Because we've all been on the other side, so it's very cool to be there. And to bring fresh water to people that don't have it. Again, what I've learned just this year, and a lot in the water work, is that it's not always that there's a lack of water, there's just a lack of clean water. So by using the filters that Sprite's Project, the water bearers created, or they didn't create, but the ones that they offer through this program, we're able to be on the ground with people and for $50 provide up to 1 million gallons of clean water, which is really enough drinking water for about 100 people for 10 years, which is kind of mind-boggling. But the flip side of that is if you live someplace, and I think about this as a mother, if I were in a position where I had to decide, do I give my child water that would make them sick, or do I let them die of dehydration? How is that a choice? That's not even an option, right? So I think that this work that Sprite's leading, I want to give her credit, it's really her project, that we get to be a part of, Jess. We get to be a part of something that's so much bigger than we are, but it's in the mastermind of us coming together and being community and say, okay, I'm going to make a difference because I can, because I get to. It's exciting. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's true. When it comes to philanthropy, it's not like I do philanthropy. It's I get to help participate in alleviating suffering or changing the condition of people's lives. And I know that, you're very connected with that. I'm just trying to draw out all the different things you're involved in so that people watching here can get a 360-degree possible.
Well, can I say something about business then?
Please do.
Okay, so here's the deal. I married into a family business when I was 23, and I've had a lot of experience in business. I was thinking about this morning. I was teaching about sales and how sales is like the easiest, most wonderful thing in the world when you actually get that it's all about service. You get to serve somebody, right? There's the kind of mindset stuff. And you practice, right? You have to keep doing it to get good at anything. I think what has happened for me in business now, Jess, is that because there's some things I'm really excellent. I'm excellent at monetizing a company. I'm excellent at creating system structure, building teams so that a company can run without the leader somewhat. We still have to be somewhat involved, but we're not in day-to-day operations change to our business, right? We have autonomy and freedom. That just happens to be my life experience. And I think that the people who are listening to this or watching this in the future, I want you to think about, like, what's that thing that you're really great at, that you've done again and again, that you're just taking for granted? It's probably going to show up in your book. It's probably going to show up in your work in the world. And instead of fighting that or poo-pooing it, like, look at how can you take that? I mean, people pay me very well to consult with them because it's highly valuable. I mean, I bring them a tremendous partnership, as you know, that they can monetize and make a big difference in their business. So if I can use that to create a great income and then in turn have my time freedom go to those who are not necessarily going to be my clients, but I could get the opportunity to help, it's just service all around and everybody wins. Yeah. So.
I mean, that's great. And I think there's a lot of takeaways from that. And my own personal experience that I shared before about how Laura encouraged me to shift into more based discussions around publishing and around bringing on new authors, many of whom are now immortalized here on the Wall of Fame. But it's such a different mindset to think like, okay, it's time to make some sales calls. I mean, does anybody ever wake up and sales calls? Actually, you might. Because or maybe your husband, Scott, right?
That does.
a very small percentage of people get the idea of doing outbound sales, right? But sales can happen in almost any context. And when it happens in a service-driven context, that was the shift that helped for me, was just getting into conversations with authors where I'm not trying to sell them anything. I want to understand their motivations in writing a book, their goals in writing a book, see where I can merge in my own creative ideas to help them expand their vision for what. And if that's a fit, then it's just a matter of reviewing an agreement and coming to terms financially to do the actual work, which is by far and away more exciting than signing a publishing agreement. And so, in the publishing agreement, it's technically, right, a sale. So shifting that mindset towards, now I allocate 10 plus hours a week just to be in conversations with authors and potential authors. And it doesn't actually matter to me, if 1, 2, 3, or nobody signs on as a new Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press author in that week, because 1, I'm spending time doing a valuable service. I'm helping move the needle in every conversation with an author. And 2, a month, 2 months, 3 months later, they may come back and say, that conversation spurred me into action and now I'm ready to go, like, send over the paperwork, let's do this. And in aggregate, I find as long and as I continue to just stay in that conversational service-based space, the better everything seems to work out.
And you're an amazing partner. And everybody should have a publisher who's their partner. I mean, I think that this is something that's not to be poo-pooed. It's huge, the amount of love and care that you put into your projects, Jesse. And I think that's the place where I know you and I are so resonant, is really this place of authentically caring about bringing the message and being of service. And, you just said this, and I want to reiterate it, is the place of, like, every conversation matters. So whether or not that person is going to sign a contract and be your publishing client in that moment, you have an opportunity to be of service. And that's why you're publishing bestsellers left and right, and your business is on fire, because you're really, again, you're congruent with who you are. And, and you are a beautiful partner, and you bring so much to the relationships that, I can say, as your published author, I was fully served and supported in a way that I had to learn to allow myself to be. And it was wonderful, and I'm so grateful. And I know that you do the same for everybody that you publish for. So that's important for you to know.
Well, I appreciate that. And doubly so since we're here on an interview, thousands and thousands of people. But at the end of the day, it's that exactly the case. And I think if there's a takeaway for everybody watching this, whatever your industry is, whatever your niche is that you're focused on, then actually focus on serving and moving the needle for people in that niche, instead of just thinking about how you can set up, sales calls and looking at conversion rates and stuff like that. All of that is a derivative. All of that is important, but it's a derivative of the actual service and value that you provide people one-on-one. For me, after I've had now well over 100 conversations, many of them in depth with authors, or conversations with well over 100 different authors and entrepreneurs, it's interesting because that's the recurring themes that I notice, the trends, etc. That becomes the basis for the training videos I create and the topics I discuss in larger audience formats. And at the risk of going way down, a rabbit hole with this, I think that there's something important here that I want to convey that you've been speaking to as well, Laura, is that when you really connect with people and be of service on a one-to-one level, it opens up the ability to see how you can help hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. In the case of some of the charity partners you're working with, millions of people. It's got to start somewhere, right? And it's got to start with you. So with that said, Laura, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share? And then, of course, let everybody know how we can find out more about you and how we can connect.
So let me just say thank you. I am very honored. Again, I want you to know that. I know we have our partnership, and this is a big deal. I mean, this summit is bringing a tremendous amount of value and tremendous amount of information and tools to people. So thank you for inviting me to share. And, I think the biggest piece that if I could give people just one word of advice, it's to really, truly be compassionate with yourself in the process. There's a lot happening in the world that's moving very, very quickly right now. I've spoken so many times in the course of this interview about the importance of allowing yourself to be supported, being part of community, being, with others who have done it, so that there's no valor in trying to do it all yourself. And as it gets, scary or new, just be patient with the process. There's a lot available for you, and you're clearly called to be a messenger, or else you wouldn't be on the summit. So I look forward to meeting you when I get to see you in person, and supporting you in your journey as you are growing as a messenger. And, I think that's about it, Jess. I don't know I'm going to make it till
I just don't want to take the mic away from you as long as you have anything else that you want to share.
I think that's it. I was going to say, I don't know how I'm going to stand it to not see you till August, but, I love the work that you're doing, and thank you for bringing this to everybody.
Well, it's my pleasure and my honor to have you on, Laura. And thank you, I'll say it as publicly as I possibly can, for the impact you've had on my life. So there you have it, everybody. Laura Gisborne, author of Limitless Women. Find her at lauragisborne.com, limitlesswomen.com, I believe. And just get into her world. You won't regret it. And her world is, in turn, all of our world. And it's one that's very motivated and driven by service and philanthropy. So thank you very much.
So do I hang up now?
No, you're good. And thanks everybody for joining for this interview on the book business and brand as much as we did. Bye for now.